Henrietta Wood was born on the border of slavery near the Ohio River sometime between 1818 and 1820. Her early years were spent in Town, a small river settlement in Boone County, Kentucky, named for Moses Towsey, who held Henrietta and her family in bondage. When Towsey died in 1834, Henrietta was separated from all she had known when sold to a Louisville merchant for $700. This sale soon led to another, and Henrietta found herself on a riverboat headed to New Orleans as the property of a Frenchman named William Sirode. When financial problems caused the breakup of the Sirode family several years later, William left for France, and his wife Jane returned to Louisville with Henrietta. Jane soon moved them across the river to Cincinnati to open a boarding house.
So the laws of the state of Ohio at that time required that any black man or woman who came into the state had to register as free before they could be employed. And that's exactly what Jane Sirode did. She took Henrietta Wood down to the Hamilton County Courthouse and registered her as a free person, handing her freedom papers for the first time in her life. I think it's telling that later in her life, Henrietta Wood looked back on her years as a free woman in Cincinnati and described them as a sweet taste of liberty.
The Sirode children felt Henrietta's emancipation cheated them out of their inheritance, so they devised a plan to illegally reclaim what they considered their property. In 1853, they paid Henrietta's employer, Rebecca Boyd, to trick Henrietta into traveling with her across the river to Covington. Once in Kentucky, Henrietta was turned over to Zebulon Ward, a deputy sheriff who defied the law protecting Henrietta's right to freedom.
I think it's clear that the kidnappers knew what they were doing. They knew that Henrietta Wood was a free woman, and in fact, they located her freedom papers, the copy that she had been given by Jane Sirode, and confiscated those as well. She was taken to an inn in Florence, Kentucky, the first stop after this kidnapping, and she talked to an innkeeper there about the fact that she was a free woman and that her freedom had been stolen away from her. And that set off a whole chain of events that resulted in a lawsuit being filed in Lexington, Kentucky, attempting to prove that the story was true, that she was a free woman.
Even with the help of the innkeeper, Henrietta's freedom was denied. After briefly being held in Ward's custody, Henrietta was sold to notorious slave trader William Pullum, whose firm trafficked thousands of enslaved people at Forks in the Road, a large slave market in Natchez, Mississippi. In an 1876 interview with the Cincinnati Commercial, Henrietta discussed the move, saying, "They said that Ward had told them to get me out on a plantation and not to sell me to anyone in town because I'd raise another suit in the courts. So they sold me to an old cotton planter named Gerard Brandon for $1,050. Soon after her arrival at Brandon Hall, Henrietta gave birth to a son, Arthur Sims. His presence perhaps restored hope during this dark time. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation led many slaveholders to move west, including the Brandons, who fled to Texas to retain their enslaved people, including Henrietta and Arthur. When the Brandons returned to their Mississippi plantation, Henrietta and her son also came, working there several years.
Years after the Civil War, she returned to Cincinnati, and she was able, with the help of a lawyer there, to file a lawsuit against Zebulon Ward, the man who had kidnapped her so many years before. And after a long period of litigation, she won this lawsuit in 1878 and received from the court $2,500, both in lost wages and damages for her long ordeal in the South. Even though, if in some ways, $2,500 was not what she had asked for from the court, and certainly wasn't, I think, a sufficient restitution for all that she had suffered. It was nonetheless a significant amount, and it made a big difference for Arthur and his family in the years that followed.
Sometime before 1880, Henrietta and Arthur moved to Chicago, and the money awarded to Henrietta allowed them to settle comfortably in their new city.
Because Arthur was able to get a law degree and purchase a house, that wealth became the foundation for his descendants, his children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, to pursue a lot of different careers, ranging from doctors and librarians to jazz musicians, a Tuskegee Airman. Well, one of the things I think her story shows is that the current conversation about reparations has a long history and deep roots in the nation's history. Henrietta Wood was one of a long tradition of African American women who articulated the demand for reparations. Her story really speaks to a person who would not back down, but pursued justice for herself and her family to the fullest extent of the law.
Henrietta died at the age of 94, leaving a solid foundation and a legacy of resilience.